Welcome back. We're joined now by Leah Wyar, the president of People magazine and an old and favourite colleague of mine. We even did a reality show together.
We did.
So Cosmo, right? It was absolutely hilarious. We had cameras in the office the whole time, and Leah was by far the emergent star. It was very exciting. Anyway, you're going to give us the download on the Baldoni bottomless pit of bizarrity.
Yeah, it is a bottomless pit. You just can't get enough.
And I feel stupid because I didn't realise this was going to turn out to be such the story that it has. So I haven't really committed to it. And my understanding of it is flawed. And I think, is it fair I can say the same for you, Sam?
My understanding of it is deeply flawed. And yet I seem to have very strong opinions about it.
Well, of course, that's why we love you. Yeah. I would just like to hold this up because what Leah has just said, don't worry, it's all going to become clear. And she has brought us this magnificent flow chart of who's who. It's a who's who of Baldoni and Blake. And instinctively we go to support Blake, I guess, because she's got great hair, truthfully, and she was Serena Vanderwoods, and I'll never forget how much I loved Gossip Girl. But I watched it all of one season on a plane, and then I've never watched it since. A bit like your donut. I overdid it.
Okay.
It was just perfect, but I'll never need to see it again. So when did this all sort of start?
Yeah, so the fishiness, I think, started at the premiere, which was last August 2024.
It does feel like it's been going on for several years, so it might not be 24.
And by the way, it has been going on several years because they started filming in May of 23. So and we were catching glimpses of like the fashion and like the interesting choices that were being made.
Was it fashion?
Odd fashion.
Terrible camo jacket, which no one should have made, let alone worn.
My daughter is in fashion, and what she said about it is that based on Blake Lively's fashions in the movie, it's very clear that the producers hated her.
Oh.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
So that's why it feels like it's so long. But it was very fishy at the premiere because there was a clear line of demarcation between Blake and the cast, and then Justin. It was them versus him. He did everything alone, walked the carpet alone, all the press rounds. He did interviews by himself. They weren't even around. And then we learned later when he filed his lawsuit that he was banished to the basement during that premiere with his family, and they showed pictures of them in windowless rooms with like pallets of water stacked this high and pallets of snacks stacked this high. So they were clearly in the basement of the AMC in Lincoln Center. So that was where it started to get weird. And you knew instantaneously. We had a set source that said, all is not what it seems, and there is so much more to this story. So that's where you kind of
I long to have a source that sends something like that. So sinister.
All is not what it seems. Not as it seems. So who fires the first shot of litigation, I guess?
She does. I will also say, though, before that happens, he hires a crisis PR person a week after the premiere. Okay. So that's when everyone is like, okay, we saw something going on at the premiere. This is now a thing. And then a few months pass, and she files a complaint a couple days before Christmas, citing disturbing and unprofessional behavior on set, hostile work environment. She gave some examples that he entered her trailer uninvited while she was pumping.
Because she just had her fourth child, right?
Just had the baby. There were inappropriate statements regarding sex and porn on set, like this type of stuff. So instantaneously, I think as a woman, having lived through the PTSD of Me Too, you're like, okay, Team Blake, right? And that, I think, most people felt that way in the beginning. Like, this is just another gross moment in Hollywood. And like...
And also, can I point out that Justin Baldoni, who I'd really not come across before this movie, he is the director of it and he stars in it. And a lot of the script literally talks about how good looking he is. And so you're like, how is this? Because first of all, you're on screen with Blake Lively, who, however she turns out, is gorgeous. And he plays a character that is just far too good to be true. It makes no sense. He's a neurosurgeon. He loves children. He's good looking. He's rich. I mean, it's like a sort of bad version of 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, That's interesting.
Did he write the script or did someone
No,
else
he
write
didn't
this?
write the script, but he directed it and he stars in it.
And he produced it, and he owns the rights to the book. So there's two.
The Colleen Hoover book.
Yeah, and there's 2 books. There's It Ends With Us, and then the follow-up, It Starts With Us. He owns the rights to both.
Okay.
So theoretically, this could continue for many years to come.
Okay,
Well,
great.
I'm fascinated to know who would work with either of them after a $400 million lawsuit, but please continue.
Okay, so she files this complaint. The next day is when the Times story comes out. And the Times story is titled, "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Campaign,"
Yes.
which everybody is like, whoa, my God, she got smeared. What is happening? So this is like the Blake train like going, right? Like,
So wait a minute. So the New York for people who didn't read it, just explain what the New York Times story was.
The New York Times was essentially ran through the allegations that she had filed in the complaint the day before. All the things that we had talked about, like inappropriate conversations. He took liberties kissing her during sex scenes. There was maybe intimacy coordinator issues. Like all of that stuff was in the Times story.
So they had a heads up on the lawsuit that she was filing?
I don't know if they had a heads up. I assume they would have gone to ask questions, right, to get his feedback, but I don't totally know that.
Okay, so the Times comes out with a huge long piece,
Yes.
which everybody is sending to everybody.
Everybody's talking about it. And on the same day, he's dropped by WME, who also reps Blake as well. So he's dropped. Okay, so now this is starting to like pick up a lot of steam. And then, sorry, I have a timeline because this is very complicated.
No, I love the fact you brought incredibly legal-looking notes.
I mean, this is now 3 lawsuits that were filed in 16 days. Like, there's a lot going on.
Right.
Yes. And so at this point, the cast is starting to show support toward Blake. So you're like, oh, they were on set. They saw all this. Like, maybe this is real. This got legs. New Year's Eve, though, he files his lawsuit against the Times. And that's he alleges libel. It's a $250 million lawsuit. He's saying they cherry-picked information. He removed context. That misled the public. That's making him look bad. And not only, in her original complaint, she said his team, they were planting all these stories, making her reputation look bad. He's saying, you did the same thing to me. You're telling everybody that there are HR violations all over the set. Not true. So, they're going tit for tat now.
Okay.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
That
This
was
is high stakes.
high stakes.
Okay.
Now, she then turns the same day her complaint into a real lawsuit against him. So now there's 2 lawsuits as of New Year's Eve.
So there's the first lawsuit, then there's the Times piece. Then
Hers was like a unofficial complaint, not a lawsuit. It was a complaint.
it was a complaint.
Yes.
Okay, so she makes a complaint. The Times piece comes out. He files a suit against the Times claiming libel.
Yes.
And her complaint was based on her experiences on set and then a PR campaign that had been rolling out for months prior to the movie launch, which I remember because my kids saw it roll out on TikTok. So it all kind of made sense to me when she filed her complaint. I was like, I remember this. I saw this playing out in real time, this campaign against her.
Everyone's kind of putting pieces together, but now it all starts to be really cleanly laid out and official.
Now people are paying lawyers, which is expensive.
And that is very expensive. So the day that he files, we talked about the day he files this $250 million lawsuit against the Times, she formalizes her lawsuit against him. It's unspecified, the amount of money. It's not as blatant as what his lawsuits are calling out dollar amounts. And then in the middle of January is when he drops the huge bomb of the $400 million lawsuit against Blake, Ryan Reynolds, Leslie Sloan, the publicist.
And what is he claiming? That I'm assuming he can never work again?
It's 179 pages, the filing. He's claiming civil extortion, defamation, invasion of privacy.
Can I ask a question about the original complaint that Blake Lively lodged? What was the intention behind that? Who was the complaint to?
The complaint,
Yes, that's a good question.
If the complaint came out the day before the Times story, the complaint, I think, was to surface this to allow the Times story to come out.
I see, okay.
The why, though, I think is still a mystery to everybody because you go from filming the movie, premiering it, and there being weirdness there, And then you're jumping to these lawsuits. And it's like, what happened during these gaps that made her want to do this, that made her want to, is it, and there's so many theories. It's like, did she really just feel like she was being sexually harassed? Maybe, who knows? But then it gets like really, really, it's an onion that just kind of keeps going and going and going. And that's where it starts to get a little confusing as to like the intention of it all.
And he's now releasing emails and texts from her that appear to slightly undermine the idea that she was sexually harassed. Or he offers her an intimacy coach and she says, I don't need to speak to her before the movie, which actually seems reasonable.
That's reasonable.
And then there's a lot of issues about, she claims, or Ryan Reynolds claims, that Baldoni was weight shaming her because she was just getting over having had her fourth baby.
Yeah. I call this his receipt era. Baldoni's like, he's just throwing it all out there.
Right.
Like he releases the footage of them slow dancing. And I think the story is, she says in that particular scene that there was no dialogue, that he had a kiss that kind of like dragged from her ear, like all the way down to her neck. And he tells her she's smelling good. So it's sort of feeling like it's very gross. He releases this footage, which actually has audio. You hear the part of, oh, you smell good, but it's actually in response to a joke that she's talking about, like, oh, my self-tanner might be all over you. And so it's like, this is weird. Like it's so blatantly different from what she's saying to what he is sort of proving was what happened. And obviously he could be cherry picking things, like who knows, but he's really smacking down a lot of these claims that she brings to the table. He releases the video. He releases this wild voice note. I don't know if you sat and listened to that. Cringy.
Yes, I did.
This is the 7-minute voice note that he
the one at
leaves
3
for her
o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
Yes. I have a hard line against voicemails left at 3 o'clock in the morning. To me, like leaving someone a message at 3 o'clock in the morning says you have no boundaries whatsoever. Like that is not okay.
I couldn't even get through the whole 7 minutes because it's so hard to listen to. It's overacted in a way. It is.
Do you think it's performative to make up for something that's already happened?
I don't know if it's that or if that is just who he is as a person.
Right.
There's a lot of actors who are just on all
He's
the
just
time. Like,
a very, very good-looking director and actor. So good-looking, just like crazy good-looking.
a lot. I mean,
I would
lot
like
of
my
the
mum would
internet-
have a few things to say about his face. She could point out some flaws in his face.
She
It's
could?
just, I'm just saying.
Well,
she could. It's good to have a Yorkshire mother because you're never going to get above yourself because she can always point out a flaw that she spotted from 200 paces.
Well, let's maybe talk about that for a second, because in that video that he releases of them slow dancing, she makes a joke that maybe he should get a nose job.
Interesting. I think my mother would agree with that. She would.
We should really have your mother on.
Yeah,
at some
honestly,
point.
she'd be very good on the
can tell me
podcast.
all
I
She
got a
would.
soft spot for the Italian men with the large noses.
So also, what was the thing about someone released, and I'm assuming this is part of the smear campaign, and it came out last summer. They reminded people of an interview with a female journalist, a Danish journalist, that Blake had done, where Blake looked like she was being a bit hostile to the journalist who was there to help her promote a movie.
Yeah, and the journalist, I think, said, how's, like, congrats on the little bump.
Meaning because she was pregnant, right?
And Blake was like, well, congrats on your little bump. And she wasn't pregnant. So these things started to come out, and you then start to say, like, well, is this who she is in real life? And that's where I think it gets sticky, because is this a character shaming moment too, or is it just proving that everything she says in the very beginning complaint is like not all it's cracked up to be?
But where does it end? Like where?
Maybe it never ends with us.
It might.
I think that's the sequel. It's not. It starts with us. It never ends with us.
And then I think the piece of this that is hard for him is that his whole brand was that of a male feminist after Jane the Virgin. Like that was his whole social media vibe. He had a podcast that talked about toxic masculinity. He did a TED Talk that was about this. So that was his full brand. And so now this whole thing has put that in question. And I think like he stands to lose the most from all of this in terms of credibility because post Jane the Virgin, that was who he was.
At this point, I feel like if you are a man in Hollywood and you say out loud that you're a feminist, that's your tell. And I don't know what it is, but it definitely is something, and it's going to come out in the wash.
Well, the wash cycle is spinning.
Oh, boy.
I highly recommend this. I'm hoping that people can get this on the People website because it's so good. You're a total expert. What is the next stage, just so we can prepare ourselves?
The next stage is the trial's next March. They did a
my God, we've got
I know. It's a whole
year.
year.
What?
And they did a pre-trial on Monday, and we sent a reporter. It was pretty like dull. The judge did say that if they don't chill out on the public PR stunts, that like they'll expedite the trial and it would maybe possibly come sooner. And he's expecting the attorneys to take it down.
Can you imagine living with either one of them? Because this is going to be, they are going to become so obsessed. You know what it's like when someone has a legal case and all they can do is talk about it? That's what's going to happen to them. I cannot believe anybody is going to work with either of them until this is resolved.
It's going to be rough.
Oh, no. I think people will be very happy to work with Blake Lively. I mean, she brings the heat. I mean, like, she's a star. Of course they're going to work with her.
Also, people have been through worse. I mean, like, look at Mel Gibson, and he's still kicking around.
It's different for men than it is for women. I think people don't like it when women have sort of Sturm und Drang around them. I bet this does impact her career.
I feel like it was very brave and smart to actually, I feel like it was very instructive to reveal the step-by-step of what a smear campaign looks like. And the fact that it could even reach someone who is in her position, I feel like it was just kind of like opening that up to the world, really opened a lot of people's eyes to the kind of the machine behind the machine, which I think was a really interesting move. And I can understand why he's upset about it and it's affecting him, and all of that is true and all of that is real and it's all extremely painful. But I think she's like one of the only people in Hollywood who can take a risk that big because she's in the position that she's in. She's pretty untouchable financially. They're very financially successful by all accounts.
But wasn't one of the problems that she felt that her hair product that she was just launching off the back of a film about domestic violence was impacted by this?
Yeah, I mean,
probably was.
That's in her
Yeah.
suit too, saying that, you know, it's various businesses that she has are in peril too. So, and that's one of them. The Blake Brown, I think, is what the target line's called.
Like
Her
these
hair
things
does look
happen
very
all
good in the
these
movie.
things happen all the time to much less wealthy people, and we don't know about them. We just
That's-
hear all this bad press about someone, and then you go, "Oh, I've changed my mind about it." And she is kind of one of the only people who can like lay it out point for point for point, and go, "This is actually what happens. Take a look at it, and here's why it's painful." And I think it's really interesting. I mean, you cannot deny that that happened. I was there. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. I was like, what is going on here? Why does everybody hate Blake Lively all of a sudden in the summertime around the release of the movie? You know, I'm not a person who is that aware of these things. I'm not on a lot of social media myself. So for it to reach my eyeballs meant that it was like a pretty meaningful campaign against her. And it was just interesting to see it point for point. I think that was a real awakening for a lot of people. And, you know, it's meaningful to me that you can see a lot of the people who are also in the movie are kind of on her side. And I think that means something.
Yeah, it's deep state
It's
publicists.
pretty deep bunch of people who were like, yeah, it was bad.
Well, the movie was bad too, so that's the
Oh, my
problem.
goodness.
It's always one of
Oh,
the
my
things, isn't it, where
goodness.
you just...
Oh, my goodness.
If only it was a really great movie. If only this was about something worthwhile, that would be so
Yeah.
much more interesting. But Leah, thank you so much.
yeah.
I miss
Thank
working
you.
with you so much.
So nice. Thank you.
Okay, come back.
Anytime.
Yeah,
Thank
come
you.
back.
This is
before,
my Roman Empire.
Okay, come back before March 2029, whenever it happens.
29. God, that might be the second movie.
This is why people hate celebrities. $400 million lawsuit.
Crazy.
Crazy, but it keeps you in business.
It really does. We'll take it.
Did that help? Do you now have clarity?
I think I have clarity, but I don't know. What is clarity?
I like Blake Lively. We used to put her on the cover when I was editing Marie Claire and Cosmo. I'm sort of still Team Blake. I'm just very confused because the film has clouded all judgment for me because it was so bad. But I will say it's too much about him, the movie, and how good looking he is, and he's not that good looking.
I find it's actually funny, but watching the movie put me even more squarely on Team Lively. I think I already was, and it just put me there even more deeply because it's directed so claustrophobically. Like every frame is so tight. I felt like I was being smothered by his face. It's just so. I don't know how to I don't think anyone should watch it in order to see this. Just let me tell you that it was like being. It was like being suffocated by the close-up shots.
The close-up shots of him kissing her.
Yeah, even when the vibe is so incredibly creepy, and I'm just not sure it was like intentional. I don't think it was I don't think it was the intention of the script. I think that's just he kind of directed it creepily. Is that?
Well, I think he directed it to make himself look like the hero and incredibly good looking, and thought he would probably launch from this as the next Brad Pitt. Yeah. And in fact, the complete reverse has happened.
The complete reverse has happened, and it's an extremely ugly story. But I really do applaud Blake Lively for coming forth with the information that she learned about the very intricate campaign against her. Like, there was a big gap, many months between the time that campaign was in full operation and for her to issue her complaint. So she must have learned within that couple of months span exactly how technical it was. And I think it's actually really, it's very elucidating.
And it's very Trumpy. I mean, lawsuits flying everywhere, huge sums of money, neither side backing down. That feels like the new world we're living in.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't blame her. And, reputationally, I guess I don't blame him for trying to, fight for his point of view. But, I don't know.